So I powered my way through the rest of the Ronald Colman films. These are gonna be brief because I watched 5 and I'm gonna put them all in this one video. So buckle your seatbelts. The first one was 1929's Bulldog Drummond. This was the first talking picture for Ronald Colman. He has that beautiful velvet voice. And this was not the first Bulldog Drummond film, but it was one of the, is the one that really launched Bulldog Drummond into being a character that there are like 40 Bulldog Drummond films. And I believe Ronald Colman only reprised the role once. This film was fun. It's not my favorite Ronald Colman film. He is good as the character, but it really does feel like sort of an early talkie, and some of the early talkies really work, and some of the early talkies are a little clunky, and this is more on the clunky side, and there were some moments that just really didn't work for me, but it did have a beautiful ending. I really enjoyed the ending, and I want to recommend that you watch the John Howard series of Bulldog Drummonds. I think there's 7 or 8 of them. They're all an hour long. There is one through line that goes through all the John Howard films, and it will make your heart soar at the end. And if you watch those and then rewatch the Philadelphia story, you suddenly feel really bad for Katharine Hepburn's fiance because he is played by John Howard, and you will love him because Bulldog Drummond will make you love him. That's not this Bulldog Drummond though. Same character, different series. That's Bulldog Drummond. The next one that I watched was the 1930 version of Raffles. So actually last July, Star of the Month was Olivia de Havilland, and I watched the 1939 version of Raffles with David Niven. David Niven's very charming. Olivia is very sassy, but that movie was boring, boring, boring. This version, it's pre-code, it's sassy, it's Ronald Colman being like a bad boy, and Kay Francis with that black hair and those dresses. Woo! This film was fun from start to finish. It's directed by George Fitzmaurice. The very first thing is them like dancing and all this up in each other's faces. And the story follows a sort of gentleman thief named Raffles, who everyone thinks is this gentleman, but really he's like a jewel thief. And he's trying to go straight because he loves Kay Francis, but once a jewel thief, always a jewel thief. There's a lot of hilarious society people and hysterical women and beautiful dresses, and it's just a fun film, and it has this just hilarious ending where spoilers, they were like, you know what, fuck it, we're gonna leave society and just go be jewel thieves, and it always love it. It's a similar ending to the ending of the 39 version, but I felt like this film was much better in telling the story. And I believe there's a 1925 version. I don't know if it's from the same story. It might be. It's from a 1906 story, so it's probably the same story. I haven't seen that version. It'd be interesting to see that. So this 1930, this film, of all the 5 that I watched today, I think Raffles 1930 was my favorite of them. But the next film I watched came very close, and this was The Devil to Pay! Also directed by George Fitzmaurice, and it was Ronald Colman and Loretta Young with a very blonde Myrna Loy as the other woman. Basically, Ronald Colman is like the prodigal son. The film starts out with him, I think he's in South Africa or India or something, and he's failed at setting himself up. So he's auctioning off all of his possessions in order to get back to England. The thing is, all of the possessions were given to him by his father, so his father's a little pissed, and on his way back to England, he stops to visit Myrna Loy, who is a lady of the night and a songstress, singer, whatever. He also, there's this great moment where he buys a dog, and he's debating buying the dog because the dog's too expensive and he doesn't have any money, but the dog is like, yo, you are my master, you need to buy me. And it's maybe one of the best film dogs I've ever seen. Like, that dog was a star. That's what I have to say. And Ronald Colman and that dog had some chemistry. So then Ronald Colman meets his sister's friend, played by Loretta Young, who is engaged to a boring man. As often happens in these movies, when a a roguish but gentlemanly man meets a woman who's trying to do the right thing by her family by marrying a boring man. She ends up leaving him for the rogue. That's usually what happens. That's what happens in this case. But then Myrna Loy's still there, and they have to deal with the fact that he's a gentleman, so he wants to say goodbye to Myrna, but like Loretta Young is like, if you love me, you won't do that. And it's like, if you loved him, you'd let him say goodbye and be a gentleman, right? Right? That's what I think. So obviously shenanigans ensue and misunderstandings happen, and will they live happily ever after? You'll have to watch the movie. But this was really fun. It's called The Devil to Pay with an exclamation point. The next film I watched was called Cynara, Cynara, also known as I Was Faithful. A bunch of the posters are called. Say that's the title. This was directed by King Vidor. I love King Vidor. His silents are my favorite. I love several of his talkies. This one pits Ronald Colman back with Kay Francis. It is told in flashback. Ronald Colman is leaving Kay Francis to move to South Africa because he's been shamed and can no longer be a barrister in England. And you're like, what happened, Ronald Colman? Why are you leaving your wife? And so he tells his wife is like, why did you do it? And you're like, what did he do? Why did he do it? And so you find this out. He cheated on his wife. But he was like he was faithful in his own way. This film was inspired by a line, Cynara, I was faithful in my own way, which I guess was famous at the time. I didn't recognize it. But he tells like how he accidentally wound up in this affair, and then how, oops, the woman accidentally killed herself. And part of it, like, I enjoyed the film because Francis and Colman had such great chemistry, and even the woman playing the other woman, what was her name? Phyllis Berry. She was really fun. She was really great, and you understand sort of why she was attracted to this man and why she just threw caution to the wind and started an affair with him even though he was married. And you kind of understand it, but at the same time, he keeps blaming everything that happens on like other circumstances and doesn't really take account of himself. And it ends, you know, as you kind of expect it to end, with them getting back together and Kay Francis realizing that like he's not a bad guy after all, even though he cheated, and then they're going to go off together. And part of me is like, yay, love, but part of me is like, but at least take accountability for your actions, you know? So that was Cynara. The last film I watched was John Ford's Arrowsmith from 1931. It's based on a Sinclair Lewis novel. I have not read it, although I do own it. I own several Sinclair Lewis novels that I haven't read. I think the only one I've actually read is Main Street. And I don't know if there's a film adaptation of Main Street, but probably because it stars a woman. And anyways, all the ones that have been adapted are the ones about men. But that's another conversation. So this is a crazy film. It co-stars Helen Hayes. Ronald Colman is a doctor who should be a great research scientist, but he falls in love with Helen Hayes, so he decides to go be a country doctor because that's the only way he can afford a wife. And then eventually he ends up in like solving some disease on cattle, and so they're like, you can do science after all. And then he goes to the West Indies to help fight the plague, but then they're like, okay, we need you to use your serum on half the people and not the other half, and test on humans. And you're like, no, don't do that. And the people are like, please don't do that. And he does it. Spoiler alert, he does it. And you know what happens? I'm spoiling this whole movie. To punish him, basically, his wife dies. And you're like, God damn it, why does the woman always have to die for the man to learn a lesson? This is bullshit. And Helen Hayes is so sassy and wonderful in this movie. She deserved better. She deserved better. This movie was nominated for Best Picture, by the way. This was I have 54 Best Picture nominees left out of the 800 or whatever the hell there is. So I'm almost done with that, but I will never finish. I mean, I'll finish at some point. So I've had a lot of coffee, and so I'm sorry if I'm talking really fast. This movie was messed up, and there was blackface. There was supposed to be a black doctor who's like, I will I will test this on people with you because I'm glad that my people can help science. And you're like, you aren't even black. You're a white person in blackface. What is happening? It was tough. There's a lot going on in this movie, and it's a mess. And it's kind of boring. But Helen Hayes is really good, and Ronald Colman is really, really, really hot. So it's got that going for it. Of all these movies, I would say definitely check out Raffles. It was so much fun, and he's so sassy, and Kay Francis. And the other ones I enjoyed for various reasons, mostly Ronald Colman's face. Ronald Colman continues to be Star of the Month for the next several Thursdays, and I think this was the only day where I hadn't seen any of the films. So, but I am attempting to watch all the ones that we're showing that I haven't seen before. So there will be more Ronald Colman this month. Have a good Saturday night.